Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and yesterday I had pumpkin spice Wensleydale cheese, and it was weird, but also kind of good. This chat is with Ryan Crego, best known for his recent creation of the Netflix 2D animated feature film, Arlo the Alligator Boy. Previously, Ryan was a longtime story artist for Dreamworks, working on Puss in Boots, Shrek the Halls, and Kung Fu Panda 2, among other projects, and currently he's a director, producer, and describes himself as a California dude all the way who just never left. Now, in our chat, Ryan is going to share how he went from dreaming to make an animated film to actually making one, that's Arlo the Alligator Boy, and everything he did in between to make that happen. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hi, Ryan.
What's up?
Welcome to the podcast. Not much, just chatting with a really cool guy who made a show that we're going to talk about. What's up with you?
Chilling, man. Chilling.
Yeah.
I'm done with Arlo for now, and just like,
Listen, you have a baby coming on the way and you're just chilling? Like,
my wife's doing all the
You told me before I hit record that you could slam the laptop down at any moment to be like, I gotta go.
Yes, and she might just burst through that door.
I love that.
Due date is 2 days from now, so like,
wow.
It could happen any minute, but also she's not feeling like it's going to happen. This is our second. So she's got like I'm going with her gut on this, where she's like, it's not, she's like, it's not ready yet. Yeah. She's like, I just know. It's like, I guess I'm sure you start to feel things change. She hasn't felt things change. It's been pretty static. So he's all good and healthy. We're just waiting. I'm
super glad you decided to come on this podcast while you're waiting for your second baby, which is really cool. Thank you. So let's just dive into it. Tell me all about Arlo, and like, give me for people who haven't seen it or don't know about it, like, give me the short pitch that you would have given to sell this thing to the networks and Netflix or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. I pitched it a couple times, and was lucky enough that it ended up with Netflix and got to make.
You've been working on this for
10 years before.
10 years.
Yeah, I'm trying to, I always kind of put it like in terms of like, because when I met my wife, I think I had pitched it, but it had gotten rejected or something. Like, so it's like, but around the time, and then we've known each other for a little over 10 years. So it's been probably a little over 10 years. It's kind of like, you make those like gauges in your life. You're like, yeah, it was around that. But it was the very first version. So I was working at Dreamworks animation and features as a board artist, and had this idea to make a movie about a kid that was half alligator, and I thought that would be fun. And so I started building the pitch back then, but I didn't know how to do that. Like, it was not that I was young, but like selling, and I've checked out your podcast a little bit, and like I know you talked with people about like pitching and all that stuff, and like, when are you ready? Or listen to the Fred Saber.
Yeah, it was my first episode.
I was like, I gotta listen to Fred. I love that guy. I got the chance to work with him a little bit, and I think he's really smart. And so good to have sage wisdom on your show. But yeah, like, so I got into the throes of it, and like all these ideas and trying to put them together. And I still went back to the original pitch when I went into to revamp it a few years ago. And it's not all bad. It just wasn't organized,
Okay. So, well, first of all, can you just give me the short pitch for Arlo, other than a half boy, half alligator?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So the version I pitched is not the version that was made, but I'll give you the version that was made, and then I'll tell you the version I was pitched. So, it's a boy who's half alligator, who grows up in the swamp and learns that he's got a dad that he's never met out in New York City, and goes on a journey to find him. And along the way, he meets a cast of strange and fun and beautiful characters that he connects with. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of what it was. But like the original version had him actually going to Coney Island, and he was still looking for his family, but it was a little different. It was like, there was the evidence of the mom, which never made it into the movie. And a lot of it centered around this Coney Island setting, where there was like a little bit of the show, circus, sideshow, showmanship, kind of like history around all of that, which was really cool. But it got very complicated and convoluted. And like, I've written some movies like lightly, but like, you always have more ideas than you can fit into a 90-minute
Yeah.
movie. And ultimately, I think this was 80 something minutes. So like you just start to realize like, man, we really got you got to trim it down. Like even then, like I still think the movie, like if I was to make this movie from scratch today, I would probably take some stuff out of it just so I could fill out some other pieces, like flesh it out more in certain areas. But
so like, okay, so Netflix was like, yeah, we want to make this. Why did they pick what was the selling point for them to say we want Arlo versus like, I don't know, Birdie, the half bird girl on a journey to find her mom that somebody else pitched? Like, why did they say yes? Because people are bombarding Netflix like every single day with pitches.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it comes down to, to go back to your Fred podcast, which is fresh in my mind, the execution. Follow up this one with that one, and you'll get like a 2-for-1. Execution, I think, is what really sells in a lot of ways. And I was just coming off of being the EP and showrunner for Home Adventures with Tip and O, which is a Dreamworks series at Netflix, and that was really successful for them. And so I think I already had, some momentum behind me in terms of just like them wanting to work on something with me. I really was.
You had some internal clout with their team already.
Yeah.
And then you had this refined pitch.
Yeah.
You've been working on casually for like 10 years.
Yeah. And I was also really passionate about it. And I think, I could feel like, from the beginning, when I put up the character Arlo on screen, which was like the first image of the pitch, I could feel the energy in the room, like people going, "Oh, like he's cute," you know what I mean? Like I like that, and so, I think from that point on, the pitch felt like had just a nice momentum to it, and a feeling that like, oh, I have a captive audience. These people want to make something with me. They want to make. This is like already seems like a good idea for them. So, I think I kind of felt it in the room that like this was going to go well. Also, I noticed that like when I pitched them, and I had pitched it elsewhere just like a week or two before, and I pitched it as a movie with a series to follow. And, people were like, let's just talk about the movie, or let's just talk about the series for a minute. That's a lot to buy into. And of course, Netflix was like, we love that. Because ultimately, like right now, everyone's selling their stuff to Netflix. So like if you pitch to like, I don't know, I mean like maybe, Cartoon Network's now working with the HBO Max thing. So they kind of have a direct line. They might be able to take more chances. But I think a lot of studios are selling their wares, right? So they're like Nickelodeon, for example, they're not really distributing wholly on their cable network anymore. They're like selling stuff to Netflix and selling stuff to these people and Paramount and whatever. So they've got to turn around and market it out and sell it again if you're pitching it. And so in this case, I think Netflix was the ones that were going to make it and also pay for it, which was great. That's all in one. Amazing. So they were like, yeah, this is great. I was like, you guys are crazy. Let's do it.
I'm just curious, like, what did your pitch entail? Like, did you have the full script written? Did you just have kind of like a general, like, here's how things are, here's the characters, like, let's develop this together?
Yeah, I think I had about, I'd say it was maybe like a 50 or 60 page PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, wow. That's so I
had like a lot of art, a lot of images. I had at that time I had a pretty like good 1-page analysis of the story, not a massive treatment. Ultimately, I think the treatment, the movie ended up going from like a page to, I tend to like try to work small and then build out. So like I think we started with like when I sold it, so I had like a page, and then I wrote like another 3-page treatment and kind of got a little sign off on that. Then it was like a 9-page treatment, got a little sign off on that. And then it was like a full, like, I don't know what the final number was, but maybe 32 page, so it's like almost a script, right? Where you're adding dialogue into the treatment and starting to like really flesh out all of these pieces. So I did all of that stuff on my own. And then I brought a writer in when I really got into the scripting part of it, dialogue and all of that stuff. Because I thought like, in this case, it was like, like you mentioned, having refined something for 10 years, I felt like I wasn't ready to just like say like, I've got 1 page and that's it. Because I had so many ideas still. And to like get all those ideas out with someone else right away felt like, let me get it all on paper and then we'll have something we can talk about and then we can break it apart. And, you know, that's when we start like going, yeah, Coney Island's a whole piece that like thematically might not fit. And it could be difficult to like do this and this, and what's the important thing and what's the theme. And, you know, so you start to pare it down and, you know.
Is this, and so I'm super curious about this process, because like I'm like developing a pitch right now myself, and I've also like signed something which is really cool too. But like for you, like how did rights work? If you want to share that stuff, like the option agreement, like distribution, like your role directing or producing or a creator, like how did you treat all of that stuff?
Yeah,
Like I have this thing that I super love.
Yeah, I have a lawyer. I have a lawyer that I work with, who I love. She may or may not even be retired. She's
still working for you, so she's not retired.
She's been around, man. That's why one of the reasons I love her is like she's not like I mean, I hear stories of like, oh, she was like the cutthroat, crazy, like you didn't want to mess with her. But she's been in the business. She like Steve Hillenberg and some of those dudes, a lot of TV people. So I'm like, I basically let those things go through someone else. So I don't have to, like, obviously you're on the end of it, like agreeing to something at some point, but like I always kind of, because then they have a sense of like what you can and can't ask for, what should and shouldn't be said. So I mean, I always go into these things like when I'm pitching as like, it's mine until I have we really sign the paper that says like, okay, now someone else is gonna have control of this, and you give up a lot. I mean, you know, with Arlo, for example, I mean, I didn't know that I would be. I think they just called it like a creator or something, or like an EP, but they didn't like define that I was going to be directing the movie at that time. We didn't define that I was going to be writing the movie at that time. It was very loose, but also Netflix was just getting the animation studio off the ground. So it kind of became like when I got there, I was like, I didn't really know what we were going to do. I didn't know what the process was going to be and how we were going to make it, which was actually really cool because it gave us just like, you know, I sat down with Phil Rinda. I don't know if you know who Phil is, but he was one of the original character designers on Adventure Time. He's an artist who's kind of turned into an executive over the years and is very passionate about animation and storytelling, and very you know, he's charismatic and he's diplomatic, and he was a great like conduit between the business end and the artists. So we kind of sat down and just started talking about like, what's the way to do this, because we don't know, you know. He's like the creative director essentially for the Netflix animation studio. So
was there something that you really felt was important for you to retain? Like, did you want to be director or creator or like writer?
I think at that point I was like, well, I had already written so much of the treatment that it felt like I had to at least co-write it, rather than just hand it to somebody. Because I mean, I had already written so much that it would have been a writing credit essentially anyways, but like then, you know, rather than just hand it off. And then on the directing end, I think it just made sense for me to like, once we decided it was, you know, the movie was happening, because we didn't even know if like there was all like when they picked it up, it was like, okay, now we're here. Now what do we do with it? What is doing the movie first or series first? Like we could, you know, it was like still kind of a discussion. It was all very like malleable at that point. And so, yeah, I think, you know, given the way that we were going to do it, because the plan was to make a series that felt as much like the movie as possible, so that we weren't like deviating where it was like, here's this beautiful CG movie, and now here's the like half version that, you know, you're like, why?
Slideshow TV show.
Yeah, it's like it happens all the time. And
totally.
So rather than do that, it was like, how do we make something that feels like feature-esque in quality, and the series is elevated by that, as opposed to the series is like a half, you know, quality version of that. There are a few little changes in the series in terms of like some of the flashy things that we did to try to keep it manageable in the time frame, but we didn't like completely redesign it or anything.
Nice. I love that you're able to do that. So tell me how it feels, you know, being in the industry for so long, working for DreamWorks, et cetera, storyboarding, having this kind of idea, dream in the back of your mind that you've worked on for like 10 years. And then finally, you know, Netflix says, yes, let's do this. And we'll do the series and the movie. And then you get to direct it and create it, and it's out. And and
Yeah.
like your old film teacher like messages you on Facebook. Like how
Yeah.
does it, tell me what it feels like? Like what
A
is
lot
that?
of
What are you feeling in the moment when it gets greenlit? Like,
pretty emotional for this one because I put so much of my heart into it for so long, you know.
yeah.
And I think, you know, the hope was one day that I would get to direct a movie. I didn't know, and you know, my hope is still that I'll direct another movie. We'll see where the path takes me, um but to end up not only like directing a movie, but like I kind of, in some ways, I wish I knew what this was before. Because I think like when you go into like a lot of jobs, it's like, okay, you're coming on, we've got a script, and here's the, you know, you're taking this job, you're going to be the director of this movie that we've already developed, and here you go, kid, or whatever. Like you can see it. Like when I came into Nickelodeon to supervise and direct the Sanjay and Craig show, I was like, the show was developed, we were going. I was like, oh, I'm going to come in and I'm going to take my part and like do the best I can in this
Yeah.
thing. But with this, it was like so crazily like, you know, open that I just was like trying to do, you know, you're producing at the same time you're directing, at the same time you're writing, and then ultimately end up writing songs and like doing all these things, which is fantastic. And I wouldn't change that process, but you do, like, if I had that kind of clarity early on, like I think I would have done, you know, you're like, oh, I'd give me another shot now that I know what it's like to do all this stuff. Cause I didn't, you know, a lot of stuff I was doing for the first time,
Yeah,
making a
totally.
musical for the first time, and writing a movie that didn't have any kind of background. Like I had written movies that were based on books. So there was already some established um, context and characters and things. Um, so yeah,
So
but I mean, it was also very cool. I don't think I think I wouldn't change it, but you know, you do think that like, wow, I've
yeah,
got a whole
yeah,
new
yeah.
perspective. Um,
Well,
but
I'm just
yeah,
wondering, like, what have you considered success from this whole process for you? Like, one of the things you mentioned was you wanted to become a director. So now you've directed
yeah,
your movie. Like, is that like the,
yeah, yeah. I
the,
thought that was. I mean, I sit there a lot of times and like am very very happy. I think um, the response, particularly with I Heart Arlo coming out, the series, and from the movie to the series, and seeing the growth of the fandom, that is so great for me because I feel like first there's success in just making something,
yeah,
right? I mean, that makes me like, getting it sold was a huge win for me, totally emotional, like so happy. Being able to actually make it and bring on like really talented artists and work with those people and have a positive experience is another big win, and finish it. And then getting it out into the world and seeing how people react to it is sort of
yeah.
the
Is
last
there,
thing.
is there
And
something you were like infusing in, because you've worked on a whole bunch of other stuff for many years,
yeah,
and like, were you trying to do something with Arlo that you haven't seen done before, or something that like you were like, this is a really important value to me to put into,
um,
kids media
I
that I
tried
want
to
to?
just be honest to myself. I think in a lot of ways, like I used a lot of those experiences, but I didn't try too hard to be one thing or another. And I didn't necessarily think, and I'm just being 100% honest here, like, you know, you always hope that something crazy is going to happen. It's going to change the world or whatever. Like, whoa, this thing's a phenomenon. We've
Yeah.
never, now everyone's wearing Arlo t-shirts. That would be so great.
Yeah.
But I didn't really, honestly, in the back of my mind, like I didn't, and I don't want to, you know, speak down to anyone watching, but like 2D animation that's not Disney, that's musical, like there's a lot to buy into there that like I kind of feel like hardcore animation fans and like, you know, and people who really are going to get past that stuff and get into the storytelling, like we're going to appreciate it. And I think thematically I knew that like we were in a really good place with the people that were lending their voices to the show, both in the cast and also on the crew, that we were saying something that was pretty like, you know, that had like some reality and some context and some like emotional, you know, relevance.
Like, what is something
That,
specific that you can think of that
well,
you're?
just the notion of the characters, of all these characters being different, you know, and like having feeling like they're outsiders, these outcasts, and kind of like coming from all walks of life. And it's not about anyone specific, you know. That's not like I've, you know, it's interesting to watch because I think a lot of people can take and go, oh, this relates to me. I've seen it from, you know, people, you know, just all different, like LGBTQ plus like blogs who are like, this is definitely our story. And it's like, cool. I'm glad you feel that. Cause I mean, look, Mary Lambert and Jonathan Van Ness and Vincent Rodriguez are all bringing their voices to this. And yes, it's absolutely their story. And, you know, Michael J. Woodard is also bringing his voice, and it's his story too. So, you know, it feels cool to see that people are going like, this is absolutely my story, and it's happening in multiple areas. So I think like we had that inkling when we were making it, because I think a lot of the crew felt that way. And I think when we were pitching storyboards and stuff, and like people were getting emotional during the pitches and stuff, it was like, this is really neat. So
That's
I think
really
there's a
special that
sophistication.
Even during the storyboards, people were getting emotional. Like, you know, you have
Yeah,
something.
I remember the first time Mary Lambert came to the studio, and she lives on the East Coast. She lives like outside of Boston, and so we had her come in, and I wanted to give her like a full week. We did a week of music and meeting with Michael Woodard and recording together, but also give her on the first day, like just give her a full overview of the movie. And so I brought her in, and we had one of our board artists, Jelly Russell, pitch her sequence, which was, if you've seen the movie, it's when Arlo and Birdie are on the beach, and they're
Their toes in the sand.
Yeah, exactly. And Mary was just bawling, and people in the room, like everyone's standing around the room, like crying. Jelly's like trying to pitch through it, and this whole thing, I'm like getting all teary eyed, and it was like really neat. And Mary was just like, "You guys, like, this is my story." And I think because a lot of like, when I found Mary for this project, I felt like she was Birdie, and then also Birdie became her. And so, and I felt the same way with Jonathan and Felicia. Like, Felicia would have been totally different if Jonathan wasn't playing Felicia. The lines would have all been different. And Michael the same way. We found Michael, luckily, before, like in the writing process, I was able to write for Michael early on, because I was like, this is the guy.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it kind of sounds like, you know, being the creator director, you were also like finding people or allowing them to take like over their parts in the story, rather than, you know, being like, this is how I want it to be, has to be like this. Like, is that ringing true to how things went? Like, you kind of like,
totally. I collaborate.
People.
I'm a hardcore collaborator.
Yeah.
And I maybe and I wonder, I don't know if I collaborate to a fault or not, because I don't ever feel it, because I always get like, I get so much joy out of working with people.
You collaborate to the point where you're not even involved in the project anymore.
Like... There are times when I feel like, did I make any decisions today? I think I just said, that's cool. And that's okay. Like, that's how I set up the pieces. I think setting up the pieces, you know, finding the right people for your crew, finding the right people for the cast. Like, if you do that right, then you should feel like you're not having to, you know, make every decision, because why have like super talented board artists that are thoughtful and know what they're doing, and then tell them exactly how you want something? I've been on the other end of that, where I've been on that, like, so specific. You want, it's this word, not that word. It's this shot, not that shot. It's this camera move. Okay. And so that can be, you know, some of the directors I've worked with have taught me a lot that way, but it can also feel very, you know, like you just start to feel like, what am I contributing, other than, you know, drawing stuff that like anyone could, you know what I mean? Like, at that point, like, just do previs. Yeah. Just get build the sets and just put your camera in there and start to do it. And some directors do that. So
you mentioned a couple times that, you know, if you were to redo things now, so say, you know, like take yourself back 10 years when you just met your wife and you were just creating Arlo from the start and you're storyboarding. Like, there's so many people who are listening to this and also just in the industry who are, you know, storyboarding or animating, and they want to be in a position like yours. Mm-hmm. What would you do to speed up that process? Or like, I'm wondering, what was the mentality that got you here in the first place? Are you constantly like everything?
I would not speed up the process.
You would not.
That's what I'll say. I will not speed up the process. I would not speed up the process. I feel like I'm happy with my growth and my where I'm at. I want to keep growing. So, you know, I feel like I'm now that I've, you know, back to your earlier point, like, okay, you've directed a movie, right? And that was kind of like the goal. So now what? And like, I'm struggling with that a little bit personally, and trying to find like, where do I grow? Because that's where, like, I've always put myself in a place to learn, keep learning. And so, and I know I can learn more from just doing another movie, and I probably will do another movie, but what's the right way to do that? What's the right approach? Like, do I do what I just did? Do I, and I'm not saying I'm working on some things, but like, do I just develop another project, take it to Netflix, pitch it, here's another movie, go make that movie? Like, what will I learn from that process?
Right.
Or do I get into something that's like, I feel like I'm over my head, which I'm trying to.
So you want to be in a state of, I'm in over my head, because you recognize that you learn and grow from those experiences.
Yeah. Totally.
So how did you get in this? So would you say that mindset led you here in the first place? Like, you were always challenging your current role to be more challenging until
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's why, like, when I was boarding at Dreamworks back in the day, and working on stuff that I really liked, and I felt like I was being heard and I was valuable. So I didn't leave because of that, but I left because I felt like I needed to change my point of view, and like in the industry.
Tell me about you leaving. So you have like a steady job, you're doing well, you're, upping your game, people are enjoying your work, but you're like, you're feeling unsatisfied. And so how do you just leave? Like, did you have something planned out? Did you have another opportunity?
Yeah, actually, it was Thurup Van Orman, for those of you who know who Thurup is, who created Flapjack and supervising producer on Adventure Time early on. And he was a really like electric TV presence, and he's doing features now, and he wanted to do features, and we ended up having offices next to each other. And so we had kind of gotten on a movie that was struggling. It had to go through some growing pains early on, and I think they crewed up too fast. And so it was just a funky time on a project that ultimately, I won't say which one, but ultimately ended up being like massively successful after they kind of turned it all over. So we were on this thing going like, man, this is feeling like maybe not the best project to be on right now. What's going to happen here? And then he got this, Nickelodeon called him up and said, hey, we're making the show Sanjay and Craig. Do you want to come over and help? And then he asked me, he was like, so I'm going. And it was funny because like he had this last day, and I was like, dude, I'm going to miss you so much. All emotional. We became close buddies, and liked drawing pictures of each other and just messing around. I saw like Chris and Ricky, who you've had on here. They were in the same group. So we had like a lot of really cool, talented people.
I love that you've perused my library of podcasts, so you can just casually mention that.
Creeping on you. We got, do your research, man. But yeah, he basically was like, yo, do you want to come supervise and direct this show? Yeah. And it was sort of outside of my realm because I hadn't done TV at all. I had just done just Dreamworks at that point. And so you're like, I did a TV special or two, but like,
you're like working at your job, feeling good, but you want a challenge, and this opportunity comes up, and you're like, you know what? I'm feeling good. Like, I feel like I'm in my role. I figured it out. I'm ready for a risk.
Yeah, I needed to learn. I wasn't fully plateaued, but like you start to feel at a certain point like you're not learning as much as fast. You know what I mean? Like when you start out,
I definitely feel that.
Yeah,
I switched careers myself at one point. So
yeah, you start to go like, okay, maybe it's like you start to get better by small degrees, as opposed to like, whoa, I just did something I've never thought I could do.
Yeah, the existential feeling of life kicks in, and you're like, what am I?
Totally. So I was like, this seems like a scary thing I'll go do. I may fail at, or I might do well. I don't know. So I ended up going over to Nickelodeon and directing like, I don't remember exactly the number of episodes, but it was a lot. I directed a lot of episodes in like a year or two. And then, and at that point we didn't have episodic directors. So I was basically, doing all the lifting and boarding on them and stuff and fixing stories and all that. And it became like a really cool job. Great time, strange time and a good time, and all wrapped up into one. And then from there I was like, okay, this is exhausting, because we just kind of had, I don't know, I don't want to like bag anyone, but like, I think that somehow Nickelodeon was looking for a little bit of a change. Sanjay and Craig felt like a change, but they didn't want to commit to it all the way. So we kind of were understaffed and under budget and all these things. And it was just like, after a while I was like, man, I'm so exhausted and I want to go do, other things now. So so then I just got into writing. Thorpe and I pitched some features and did that for a while, and then Dreamworks called and we did Home, and he went off to do features by himself, with not because of anything other than we had so much going on, and we had like unfortunately we had been too successful that it broke up the band, because we had like too many things going, and this feature wanted us to work on it. And I was just getting started developing this series for Dreamworks, and I was like, I can't leave this. I felt like too passionate about the crew that we had built, and I didn't think it was the right. I would hate to be brought onto a crew and then feel like everybody just, the people who brought you on just went like, okay, peace. Now we're going to do something else that we want to do, and like I just didn't feel like the right time for me. But also, I hadn't worked in series as much. And so I felt like we just came to the agreement. I was like, you go do that, and I'm going to do this. And then like, let's be friends and help each other out where we can. And,
So, okay. So, it sounds like you've had a really illustrious kind of career in like kids animation. How, and you've moved around a lot. I guess my question is like, how often are you presented with new opportunities like this? Because, talking about it like in a 20-minute time span, it's like, oh, he was asked to go direct a movie and then direct a TV show, and then like, why do you think you are presented with these opportunities all the time? Is it just you're in a hub of animation down where you are, or is it like,
I think that's a lot. I think it's connections, I think it's like, it's being in it, but also proving yourself. People want to work with people that they
what does proving yourself mean? Because like, from my perspective, like going to animation school, the whole thing is about like skill. You have to have skill. And then when I talk to people in the industry, they're like, it's all connections. Like,
I don't think it's connections.
When you're in a
I don't think it's connections as much as well, look, how do you put this? Like, there's different kinds of skills, right? There's technical skills, and then there's working with people and being able to convince people that like everything is going to work out when things are going crazy, which they always are in animation. And so I'm always trying to be like a conduit between, somebody's making some studio is paying for this, some executive is like trying to manage the entire, the process for these executives and all this stuff. There's all these like steps and political, things that happen in this machine. And so you have to be, when you get into the management level, you have to be able to like protect your artists, and like being an artist and being able to do that, but also like understanding production and understanding schedules and keeping things on track, and like learning how to like manage people and all that stuff. Like all of that stuff is stuff that comes pretty naturally to me.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a lot of why people have been able to trust me with, continued like growth
so when there's a new opportunity, they're like, you know what, that Ryan guy, like he everything always goes smoothly for him, he gets it done.
I hope so. I try to make it that way.
in your mind, you're like, there's like bombs exploding and like
that happens, dude. I mean, like, it's not, and I don't think that's everything, but I do think like, there are people who are genius storytellers that have no concept of how to be aware of all of the consequences of their decisions, and like what happens when you put too much pressure on artists, and what happens when you put too much pressure on a studio that you're working with, or like, we're always shipping stuff out to whatever. It could be a Canadian studio, it could be in India or whatever. Like you hear stories about people who are just making crazy decisions too late in the game, or like working their crew to like death, and people are like, then the crew starts to get worn out, everyone's tired, the show starts to suffer. So yeah. I'm like, I feel like half of my job is to find good people and keep them happy and support them, and like and make sure that they feel like they have the expectations match what is capable.
Did you ever go through an experience where everything went a mess and you were like, I need to figure this out? Or it kind of sounds like this is just comes kind of naturally to you?
No, I mean, I went through like, so the Nickelodeon thing, like I said, we were kind of understaffed, under budget. I was there until like 1 or 2 a.m. at least 3 or 4 times a week, grinding it out. And I couldn't do that now. I've got kids or a kid.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the little kids are like watching this show being like, this is cute and fun. And they don't know there's like somebody behind the scenes working, grinding till like 1 a.m.
Exactly. And like, and I used to work late when I was a board artist, because that's when I am a night owl and I don't mind it.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I didn't, I didn't mind it so much then, because we were making something awesome. I was really happy with what we were doing, but it became really, truly exhausting for me and for a lot of the people that I was working with. And then, and I think that the overall like quality of life started to suffer. And I think that's when you start to go like, if your decisions are creating a situation where people feel like the expectation is that we all have to work overtime to get it done, we just don't have the time, and like that's the deal. Because I know, like, look, everyone who's working in animation works their asses off, works overtime and does all that stuff, but at some point, if that's the job and you're doing it every day for 2 or 3 years, you're going to burn out, and it's going to be messy. And so ever since then, I've tried to analyze, again, it goes back to like, where can I learn? Like, analyze where the shortcomings are, where are the places we could have done better? How can I prepare myself?
So like on your, for instance, like Arlo, how did you mitigate that? Like what is the number one thing you did to make sure that people were happy you weren't working overtime and everybody was dying? Because that could happen on any production if it's mismanaged, right? Like,
yeah, for sure. I think we did, like one of the things that I've learned, particularly over the last couple shows, was like, you have to sort of limit the scope sometimes of what you're doing, and train the crew to, like, for TV especially, not necessarily for features, but for TV, train the crew to recognize how to reuse material and reuse sets and reuse, like, why redraw the background of whatever Arlo's bedroom, why like draw it from a different angle if you can go into a folder, access this as a layout that already exists, and pop that into your storyboard, and then draw on top of that, because now the layout artist doesn't need to create a new angle of the back of the bedroom, and you didn't have to draw that bedroom, and you just had to draw the character and work on the funny poses and the writing. And so that's a win for everybody. And when you start to like recognize that, like, this can be done pretty efficiently and pretty regularly through just organization and management, production management, and all of that stuff, then I think you lighten the load on everyone. Because after that Nickelodeon experience, I had been, I was on home, and we got into a period where it's a board driven, all of these were board driven shows, Arlo too, and the board artists are writing. And so a lot of times, like, we found that just the board artists would start to go crazy over here and do this joke and do this one off and do that. And we're like, that's so funny, but not realizing, like, oh, well, they just added, some kind of crazy machine, some kind of cat, some kind of new background, a cutaway to the mom in the Bahamas, whatever, like, all within, this like flashback thing or whatever it was. And then you're like, oh yeah, that's a lot of work for someone else. It's maybe not a lot of work for the board artist. I mean, it might be, but it might not be.
Yeah,
but it's definitely going to be,
exactly. That makes total sense.
Prop and background and color and all these things that start to add up. You get behind, and once you get behind, it's hard to get out of the weeds. So I've gotten better at like managing the expectation, and also noticing like how to plan out the episodes where you've got your difficult episode, and then you've got maybe a light episode and a light episode, and then a difficult,
Like this episode happens when everybody gets turned to stone and nobody moves for 10 minutes, like that.
There's
right?
a good
Like,
one.
Yeah. Sometimes when you watch Family Guy and they've got like a 3-minute scene where it's just like somebody talking behind a door and it's just dialogue, and you're like, the animators were loving this shot.
Yeah,
like,
they were so happy that day. They went home and had a nice dinner with their families.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like, from having experience, you're looking for opportunities to cut down in a smart way on the amount of work that's required to get across the story, jokes, the artwork, etc. Like you're not cutting corners, but you're like looking for opportunities to maximize what you are making. That makes a lot of sense. Like, especially like, using the same bedroom twice instead of like a slightly different angle, even though it's fun to draw again, but like, you don't want to stay till 1, 2 in the morning redoing this whole bedroom scene for 2 seconds of.
And if at the end of the day, that other angle is going to get you something, you should absolutely do it, know. But I think that's where the part of the like sort of training and the process of like getting into these things early with the crew, and like I like to work with young artists. I like to work with people who don't know as I didn't know, because we touched on this before we started rolling, but like I didn't go to animation school, so I don't have a technical animation background. So I think there's a lot of value in people's sort of intuition and
Totally.
raw talent and raw ideas.
Yeah, I definitely feel that too. Like even just learning about the process and like what works, kind of, your brain starts to just do that formula when it's really that like deeper intuition, raw feeling that has the payoff. Like how many TV shows come out nowadays because, a formula has been proven successful and we want to jump on that. And then it's just like this boring TV show that nobody watches because it's like they're just copying success versus like,
I think formula should only, we use a lot of, and I say we, like the people that I've worked with in the past, that I try to keep as many of the people that are fun to work with around as possible. But we tend to always go back to structure for story, for like a act structure in an 11-minute is a little bit different than maybe a movie, but go into act structure and that kind of stuff and think about those things before we get into the deep into the boarding process. But then once we get into that process, we don't always go back just because it makes sense into the structure again. You know what I mean? Like we don't just go like, okay, now, but you have to fold that back into this structure. It's like, we started with the structure, we started boarding, and then this board artist took a really fun turn, a very unexpected moment. And like, maybe the episode doesn't always end, there should be an ending. There should be some satisfaction, right?
Yeah.
But maybe it doesn't go like, 2 + 2 plus like it perfectly matched up, but like where it could end up being, a little bit different. Cause it's, come on, how many shows are out there? Like if we all worked on the same formulas, that would just be,
Totally. So maybe take me back to where things started for you. You mentioned, you didn't have formal training, film school. Like, how did you get into this industry and make a huge career and become a director and all this stuff in the first place? If it wasn't, you didn't have the classic Cal Arts start,
Yeah. Well, my dad had an old projector and some black and white 8mm animated shorts.
Going way back here, I guess.
As old as that sounds, I don't know whether he got them at a garage sale or what, but like we used to watch old on film cartoons when we were kids.
Like Fleischer Studio stuff, TV, like Popeye.
Yeah, and all that stuff. Yeah, and so so that was always part of my growing up, thinking like, this is the coolest, like this is like special. And it was always cartoons. I don't know where he got them. I don't think he has them anymore, but it'd be cool if he did. But yeah, like I grew up heavy into like thinking this is something I want to do. And then I did when I got into college, I went to university and did like a film theory program, mostly because,
why didn't you do animation if you knew that's what you wanted to do?
I got into making movies in high school, and that I was doing like video production and stuff where I thought I was going to do like action movies.
Okay.
And so like, I thought,
listen, this could be the new challenge for you. Move from animation to live action.
The next Michael Bay.
There you go.
Now I got the animation background. I can do those giant Transformer movies.
Exactly.
But that's what I thought like was the deal. Cause I was like, what, 16, 17, 18 going like, put some guns in their hands and send them into the forest. We would do that. We'd go down to like Santa Cruz and like, I'd put my friends in the cold water at like 5 a.m. in the morning and have them come out like they were Navy SEALs holding guns.
Wow. They must have
and
really
like freezing
you.
their butts off. And we'd be like, yeah, we got it, dudes. Like go back and edit it and like put, Vietnam, what's it called, like chop in, like from other movies. Like I'd go into like, I'd like steal shots from like Top Gun or whatever and cut it in. So that's how I got into it. So I wasn't 100% into animation. I mean, I was like when I was a kid, but then I thought I would be an animator, and then I got into movie making. And then when I got into school, like I was in this like film theory program, but there was an animation class, like a history of animation, that I took my first year, and I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. I totally messed up. What do I do now? And then I was like, well, I'm in a cool place. I'm in a good university. I'm like studying and I've got, you know, an education that I can fall back on no matter what happens. So I'm going to do this. And I really applied myself on the film stuff. I really, you know, I loved, like, there were some classes that were so valuable. There was stuff like, you know, like a course on just Hitchcock where you just learn, you know, like you're just analyzing, every week was a new Hitchcock movie that you were like breaking down and kind of discovering like how things were done and why they were done and all that stuff. So all that stuff is still in the back of my brain, nearly useless, but somewhere in there, I think.
So
and then I got
into,
into,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, then I moved to LA to get into the business, and I applied to every animation company I could, just sending a letter online and saying, I love cartoons, man, or whatever. And like, your stuff is the best, all of you. And I got a year after I sent a resume, which was, I had worked in some TV production stuff in Santa Barbara. So it was like, not like big time stuff, just small stuff. But I basically got a call from someone at Dreamworks. They were like, hey, we're hiring production assistants. And like, would you be interested in interviewing?
Like, do you want to run coffees for us type of thing?
Yeah. And I was like, and so I interviewed for like a month to get a job where I did exactly that. But I lucked out because I got put in a story department, and that was perfect because I didn't know exactly what I was going to do there. I had a lot of motion graphics background and some editorial. I knew a lot of editorial software and After Effects and things like that, but I didn't like know storyboarding. Yeah. And so I got in there and I started making copies of all the guys working on Shrek. And
you mean like photocopies or like
photocopies? Like, here's the scene, and then you just go jeep, 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 jeep all day long. And wow. But I would be looking at these boards going like, oh, I see how this is cutting, or oh, I see what's doing. Oh, that's so funny. And then doing the tune shooter, the down shooter. Yeah. And like the guy that was the editor of Shrek would always yell at me. I like him a lot, but he would just be like, come on, man, just like moving all over. It's like an earthquake. And I'm like, I don't know, I'm trying my best. It's like, this technology is crazy. Of course, everyone works on Cintiqs now, so it doesn't, you don't get all that registration problems. But that's how I learned the basics, and then
but like, were you also like, because you have to learn how to draw, right? Like, how did you
well, I grew up drawing.
How do you go from photocopying to then becoming a storyboard artist yourself? Like,
I grew up drawing. I was also a musician too, so like I've always been on the side of entertaining people and like wanting to be in this business. So it wasn't that far. And I think that some of the best board artists are pitchers. Like they pitch so well that like you get the story even if it's not all on the board, even if it's not all in the drawing. So that was sort of my strength, was that I could get up in front of a group of people without any fear and just be like, here's the scene, this is happening, and like get everyone excited, and they're like, yeah. And then we cut it together and they'd be like, wait, what? I thought, didn't you say that was happening? And like, oh yeah, I got to learn how to draw. So yeah.
So how did you learn how to draw? Like, you know, because there's so many people are trying to become storyboard artists, and there's like, you know, a threshold that you're supposed to meet of like composition and volume and perspective, and like there's so many things that like you have to learn that I never even knew about until I started going out and shared in college. Like, how did you learn how to draw well enough that Dreamworks was like, now we trust you to do this for us?
I was doing it every day, over and over and over again.
So like you'd photocopy Shrek during the day and then go home at night.
What I would do is, at that time we had free, well, I think Dreamworks still does have free food, but like they would always have to-go containers at the end of the line. And so I would take a sandwich or whatever I could get and eat lunch and dinner. And so I lived about like 5 minutes from the studio. So I would actually go home just to get out of the studio for a minute while everyone else was like leaving, eat a sandwich, you know, watch cartoons, see what's, you know, do my studies. And then I would go back to the studio and just work in my office until I couldn't work anymore, until I got too tired. And then I would go home and nap.
So you're talking about drawing though, like
drawing. Yeah. So then I was like boarding, and we would pin up, everything was on paper, you know, like these these old guys. This one's a little. They don't make them like they used to, but I think I have some old ones still from
classic
Dreamworks.
notebook.
Yeah, they're like the animation, because they're hard to find. The animation graph aids would sell these like cool boarding books, and so the old Prismacolor, black Prismacolor pencil, and you can do everything with that. And then and so I would board scenes, and then I would pitch them to friends, and then I would get feedback, and I would show, and by friends, a lot of those people were board artists. So
yeah.
I would kind of, young and old. I mean, people like Elaine Bogan, who was one of my buddies when I started. She was a board trainee, and I was a production assistant, and she's now directing at Dreamworks features. Nice. She directed Spirit, and she's directing another movie.
So like you never had any formalized, schooling on this, because, going to Sheridan College and doing storyboards, like they harp on you so much, like, life drawing like every night, and like perspective drawing, and like try out a billion different things. Like you never really did that. You were just like, I'm going to draw the stories.
Yeah. And I think I did some life drawing at Dreamworks. They would offer the classes. So I would do those too, but I didn't have, so my boarding was always based on writing. I was always a joke, punch up comedy person. And it was later in my career that I got better at the staging and being able to draw camera moves and things like that. But like, really it came down to like, okay, where is my, horizon line? And then what are the characters doing? And
so would you say it's more valuable as a newer storyboard artist to focus on really good storytelling versus really good composition and all that jazz?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's about finding out. Well, it's also, I would say this, I think it's about finding out who you are, like going deep into your own soul, and figuring out like what kind of stories do you want to tell, and how do you want to be, putting those stories out there? Because if you want to be doing cool action scenes and choreographed fighting, like you have to draw, you have to be really good at that. If you want to do, like my buddy Andy Kung, who worked on Arlo, if you want to do the musical sequences and choreographed dancing, you got to be able to draw. If you are someone who really loves like emotional scenes between characters, and you love those like heartfelt moments and things, like you need to know how to do the character acting, but you don't necessarily have to draw them backgrounds.
That's blob 1, blob 2, smiley face, frown.
Yeah, but like then you get to stuff like, again, one of my sort of contemporaries was Maggie Kang, who's got the new K-pop Demon Hunters movie at Sony that she's working on, and she did the best acting of anyone. We shared an office for like 3 years, and her acting was always so magical, because like she knew exactly how to shift an eyelid just minimally to show that the character was like processing something that, you know what I mean? Like there's like, oh, that they're hurting right now, but they don't want to say it. Little things like that, those nuances that are like so hard to capture. And she could do that while drawing Shrek, which is hard to do because he's so silly.
I like what you're saying about kind of finding out who you are inside, and then capitalizing, like putting that out there, because, especially in the beginning of your career, and even in the middle, you can have like a little crisis where you're like, what am I doing here? I'm just learning for the sake of being in this role versus doing what is best for me. And I think, at least from my experience, it sounds like yours too. Once you find that sweet spot, you end up getting the opportunities that are best suited for you to do the things that you love and can do the best.
Yeah. You want to do the things that you really love and enjoy doing, because if that's what you're asking people to hire you for, like why work in animation if you're having to do stuff that's really
totally
hard?
You shouldn't work in animation at all then.
Like I would be
tough.
If I ever got put on like, Legend of Korra or something, I would be miserable. Like, and not that I don't like the show, or that I don't like have friends that like, or the people that created it that I love and respect. And I'm like, man, you guys are badass, but like, I can't do it. And I don't,
there's not enough half alligator, half boy characters.
Exactly. Give me the half alligator. Give me like, that's why like Shrek and stuff was always a good place for me to be. Cause I was kind of doing the stuff that was like, it was always like the one-off gags and jokes and the stuff that
Yeah, and like Legend of Korra is like serious, like like I mean not so serious, but not your style, right? I totally get that. Yeah. Cool. So maybe as we're wrapping up, like you mentioned, I love kind of your backstory, how you started off not really in the industry, and then like worked your ass off to like get where you are now. But where you think, like, what is an opportunity coming up for you next that you're excited about, or like you kind of mentioned you're not sure, like what is something that would excite you?
Well, after making a musical, as I mentioned, being a musician, and it was interesting because like I didn't often marry the two sides of like being a musician and being in animation.
Yeah.
In my work, it was like because I didn't work on a lot of musicals, and when I did, a lot of times I was like, Home was a musical series in a lot of ways, and so I had a lot of influence on it, but I didn't write the music or do the boards on those because I was EPing the show, and there's just too many. You have too many things you have to be watching all at once. So having directed and written and co-written the music for Arlo really left me feeling like musicals are where my heart is, at least for now, for the immediate, and trying to sort of put myself in a place to like grow that. I don't think, Disney has such a great foothold on the like Broadway musical movie thing. And there's people like Lin-Manuel Miranda and crap, why can't I think of Kristen Lopez, the Frozen composers. They're killing it. They're amazing, and they do such a great job that like it's not that I want to be in direct competition with that, but I just would look, more in the lane of Arlo, where it's like, okay, this is a little different. Like, how do we be even more different on the next one? So contemporary musicals, I guess, and taking that into the next phase. So I'm actively working on some things. I'm working with a couple studios, and I'm working on some of my own stuff, and just kind of be interesting to see what flies and what doesn't. Right now I'm in like a cool place, but like a very unknown place. So my brain is constantly like trying to figure out like next puzzle pieces and how to like build. I feel like this industry, here's another piece of thought. I don't know if it's advice, but like I've always felt like it's a chess game and you should know your next move. And I don't know if I know my next move right now. So I'm like, oh no, this is crazy. It's a lot, because I think there's a lot of, in a good way, there's just a lot of possibility. I think that I was like, that move is like, when I get to directing that feature, that's like me getting the,
I can die happy.
Yeah. Now what?
What? I didn't die.
Game, I guess.
Oh, no.
So that's kind of where my head's at. Like, I'm trying to figure out like, what's the coolest thing I could do with my time and my career. And luckily
I like that. What is the coolest thing I can do with my time? That's like words to live by right there.
Hey, I'll take it.
Yeah, you said it.
So that's where my head's at, man. I'm just trying to figure out those things, and like, and I'm helping some folks on some projects, and
Nice.
I work regularly. Since Arlo has been done, I've been regularly working, and holding out hope that maybe one day we'll get to go back to Arlo again too, because that would be fantastic. But
plus it's your alligator baby boy.
Yeah, I joked the other day, someone was like, yeah, what happens to the Netflix stuff 20 years from now? And I'm like, that's a good question, man. Like, we might be doing the live action version with some real kid, I hope.
Yeah, that would be really cool.
I know people hate that stuff, but that would be a dream for me. I'd be like, yeah, let's do that one. Let's get that kid.
You just said it out loud, so now you have to manifest it. Arlo the live action version. What's stopping you? Come on.
I will be there for anything Arlo from now until the end of time, as long as I'm alive.
Amazing.
I do care. Like, there's something in that show, in those characters, that I absolutely love. And I just think that, I'm glad, back to the kind of earlier point too, like seeing that people are connecting, like really connecting with it. Like, doesn't matter how many people, it doesn't matter if it's a massive success. Like, we're not measuring by the box office, which is kind of a nice thing in the streaming world.
Yeah.
But seeing that the true fandom of it, and people really like loving it and making their own versions of it. And every day I wake up in the morning, there's like 20 new posts of just like random super cuts of the movie and stuff. And I'm just like, whoa, people are like really, like they're putting their time and energy and love into this thing, and like owning it in a way that I never expected them to, or at least like could have thought about. Yeah. And so that's like a huge, huge win,
It's amazing, eh?
Yeah, it's really cool. It's nice. The best. Like, that just makes me so happy, just to know that people are you know, it's like you always go, if it was just that one person who really loved it, but like it's more than one person, which is great. Thank God.
Yeah, it's the world loving you back. Of course you have to, like, it just feels great. Like,
you feel that there's a sense of validation and that your time was well spent and that, everything.
Isn't it crazy that you still kind of like, we as humans like require, or not require, but like crave that validation at whatever stage.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for me, talking to you, like you've directed a feature film and I'm like, he's there, he's totally validated from just doing that. But you're still saying like, I get validation from, some kid like making their fan art of your character on the internet.
There's some kid who's been putting the best artwork up. And then all of a sudden the other day was like, it's my 16th birthday. And I was like, what? Yeah. It was amazing. I
think you shared something on your Twitter recently. Is that what you were?
Could have been, or like on Instagram or something. I was just like, this is out of control. Your stuff is so good. And it's so cool, and that makes me so happy just to see that that's like, that's happening. But yeah. Yeah.
Totally. Well, as we're wrapping up, is there anything you wanted to share just for somebody listening that's just enjoyed your journey? And
no, man. I mean, I think you just got to keep. We make cartoons or at least animation or whatever it is because it's most of us because we love it, and so I think as long as you're like doing that and trying to stay true to that, if you're getting into the industry, if this is like, I know a lot of people who are listening, it's a great industry. It's a supportive industry. And there are a lot of really talented people. And so, it's always going to be, you're always going to be feeling like you have to keep pushing yourself, but also finding those moments to like, appreciate the fact that you're making something. And that's like that's the end result. Like we're artists, like before we get paid, before we have jobs, most of us are just artists that, we're sitting in our parents' house, like my daughter does now, and sits at the kitchen table and just draws because she loves it. I never want to see her like have to work and get notes, but I give her notes sometimes.
Oh no, you're like that. You're like, put some more volume in this. The consistency.
I said some harsh thing the other day, just as a joke, because my wife brought up. She was like, I don't know, should we keep this one? And I said something that I was like, oh my God, what am I like? I can't joke. She's 3. She doesn't get a joke. And then I was like, no, honey.
She's going to listen to this podcast one day. Like, listen, I remember that moment. It sticks out to me now. But I being in the animation industry is like amazing. Like, what other job can you create something? Like most of the time you're a service or just contributing to something that, like, I don't know, you're in Excel, you're like, whatever, you're doing something that has no output into, I don't know, society or whatever. But
it's cool. And there's never been a time, I think, where there's been this much animation being made at such a big level.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be, I don't know what the future is. I try to always think about what the future is and where to be.
Mr. Chess.
Next. But I don't know, that it's hard to say, man. There's just so much going on, and
well, fingers crossed the future is animation. So
amazing. Video games, I guess, is a thing too. And I don't, I know it's been going on for a long time. I feel old saying it because I don't play them, but I'm like, what does that world look like? What if,
they could use Arlo as well. Hey, get into that.
Yeah, all right, well, Cuphead did, man. All right, I'll talk forever if you don't.
Well, hey, you gotta leave at some point.
I do, and I don't, it'll be like me and Jorge Gutierrez battling for the longest podcast.
Oh my goodness! Look at you, just keep pulling out these little. Hey, I know your podcast library.
That guy doesn't stop talking. All right.
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you so much for coming on the chat.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And if you're listening and you want to, get in touch or follow Ryan's work or check out more Arlo, you can do so by checking out his Instagram, which is Kriegsmamation. And I'll include that link in the description of this chat. And thank you so much for listening. That's all for now. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.